In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this baking sheet and casserole dish organizer that is easily customizable by taking the dividers out and changing them around. And it allows you to organize it just for your dishes so that you can easily just get out one thing and easily put it back. So the design is really simple. It just consists of this shelf, which is 3/4 inch plywood. And the shelf has grooves that I did with my CNC router that go all the way from the front to the back of the shelf. I use my CNC, but you could also either use a table saw or just a router with a straight edge to make those grooves or dados. Each of the grooves are 2 inches apart. And then that shelf is just sitting on another piece of 3/4 inch plywood that supports it on each side. And those side pieces are nailed into the side of the cabinet, and this shelf is just sitting on top. And then at the bottom we have some 1/4 inch, just really cheap Luan plywood that I cut into 2-inch strips that go all the way to the back. And then these dividers are also made out of, let me find one that's easy to grab, also made out of Luan plywood. And they just span the depth of the cabinet. And I think that's a 20 or 25 degree angle right here just to make it look a little nicer. And that slides between the Luan slats at the bottom and fits in one of the slots up here at the top. Just a note, I'm going to show you the way that I did it, where I used a CNC router to make the dados, but you could also make those grooves with a table saw or just a handheld router with a straight edge, or you could just use a plain piece of plywood as a shelf and do the same thing that I did down here with these slats up here at the top and just nail a bunch of slats into the plywood. Here I'm using a table saw to cut the plywood to 17 inches, and that's going to make up my top shelf and the 2 side supports. So the shelf is 17 inches deep. The side supports are also going to be 17 inches deep and about 15 inches high. I don't like doing cross cuts on the table saw. I think it's a lot easier to do it on the miter saw. So here I'm just cutting the pieces for the 2 side supports. Now I'm putting the top shelf into the CNC, where I'm going to cut the grooves all the way across, or the dados. And again, this is something that you don't have to use a CNC for. You can use a handheld router with a straight edge, or you can use a table saw, or you can just cut a bunch of slats like I do for the bottom part. And I'm using a 1/4 inch drill bit to cut these slats, which matches the width of the board that I'm using for the dividers, which I'm testing right here, and it seems to slide okay. I use my workbench as my table saw's outfeed table. So I'm getting everything in position and cleaning it up, and I'm about to cut the thin 1/4 inch Luan plywood that I'm going to use for the dividers. Now I'm temporarily connecting the side supports to the top shelf with some clamps, just so I can see how everything's going to fit together. Broke a nail. Oh my gosh. Okay, so my first attempt was too big, so now I'm going to measure and cut it down again. Give it another try. And now that I've figured it out, I'm going to cut a bunch of dividers. Testing it out just to see if it's going to fit. And just kind of marking a general angle that I want to have on it. Take it over to the miter saw and then try to figure out what that angle is. I ended up making mine 25 degrees. And one final test just to make sure everything is the right size. Heck yes. Now I went over here and I copied that angle onto all of these different divider pieces. And then about right here, I realized, oh, hey, I could just stack these on top of each other and cut them all at one time. So I made one stack of 2 and one stack of 3 and just cut that same 20 or 25 degree angle on each one. Now, time to sand it all down. I started out with my orbital sander and quickly realized that it was a lot easier just to do it by hand. Not with my actual hands, but with sandpaper in my hands. Now I'm going to cut a bunch of slats for the bottom at approximately 2 inches wide. I think I made it a little bit smaller than 2 inches just to give it a little bit of wiggle room. And I'm only going to show you 3, but I cut 20 something of these. And now testing it all out again, just making sure that everything is square and that it lines up properly. And sand all the slats. Good times. Lots of sanding. Now it's time for the installation. So first I'm going to put the side supports in, and all I'm doing is resting it along the side of the cabinet and putting a couple of 1 1/4 inch brad nails in. And I'll do the same to the other side. Sorry about my trash can. It has a motion sensor and it senses anytime someone's in front of it. Also, sorry about the gratuitous butt shot. Now it's time to cram the top shelf in. And that's a professional way of describing it. Just cram that shelf in there. Yeah. Now I need to install all of those little slats at the bottom so that everything will slide easily. So what I'm doing is I'm sticking a divider in the top, and I'm making sure that it's square to the bottom and also square to the front and the back of the cabinet. And then once I know that everything's lined up, I'll put the slat at the bottom of the cabinet and put a nail in it, and then put a second nail closer to the back. And I believe these were 1/2 inch brad nails that I used. They may have been a little bit smaller. Each of these strips are only about 1/4 inch thick. And there you have it. I ended up making a few more dividers. I needed about 3 more. Now you just get all your baking pans and shove them in there, and behold your masterpiece. Also, leave your cabinet door open so that everyone in your household can behold your masterpiece.